Coming to you from Southern California, this is Mindset, mental health news and information. I'm your host, James Curtis. On today's show,
pissed off, stressed out, burned out, down in the dumps. All of these are common feelings men experience. But if felt regularly or ignored, these emotions can fester like an untreated battle axe wound and become dangerous. Use my man therapies to help deal with everyday emotions, strengthen your mental health, and even fend off mental illness.
Men, Macho, and Mental Health. That was the voice of Dr. Rich Mahogany, therapist in residence at mantherapy.org. And even though Rich Mahogany is a fictional therapist, the brainchild of a partnership led by the state of Colorado's Office of Suicide Prevention, he could very well be the key to getting us, men, to actually ask for help before our lives get completely off track and we slide into crisis. But first, this news from the Mindset Report. The Mindset Report available online at mindsetreport.com. The Mindset Report, your most comprehensive online source for mental health news. Today's Mindset Report is brought to you by and underwritten by Responsibility, a complete guide to bystander intervention by Alan Berkowitz, who is committed to the idea that the solution to health and social justice problems requires that we engage as bystanders. Responsibility is available online at lulu.com, Lulu spelled Lulu. And if you like what we're doing here at Mindset, log on to our website, mindsetshow.com. Go to the Support Us tab and shop our affiliate vendors. There you can find everything from electronics to vitamins. Purchases through our website help support our programming. From Time.com, a social networking tool, Panoply, jointly administered by MIT and Northwestern universities, is showing promise by helping users calm anxiety and reverse symptoms of depression. From Health.com, exercise has long been linked to better mental health, and you can become an exercise addict. The article features on Health.com 20 tips and tricks to make your workout a healthy and fun everyday habit. Tip number 1, get up earlier. Germanwings, the unfortunate and tragic airline catastrophe, has been in the news. Talk of the co-pilot's mental health has been on top of mind. I had a conversation with Paul Pori. He is a psychiatrist in private practice, and also works with the UCLA School of Medicine, the Geffen School of Medicine Neuropsychiatric Institute, with residents, training them as they go out in the world to start their practices. And here's some of that conversation. Paul, I want to talk about, in light of this Germanwings airline accident and all of the speculation and accusation coming out around what seems to be and what's been reported as the mental health condition of the co-pilot who was piloting the plane at the time of that horrific crash. A lot of the questions that are being asked are going toward this issue, and that is, when does a psychiatrist have the ethical duty to tell someone that an individual that they're treating, a patient, poses a danger to either an individual or the general public?
There's the legal standards, and then there are sort of ethical considerations, and maybe one could say even moral considerations, ethics and morals, going hand in hand. Just starting with the legal ones, every state has its individual rules in terms of duty to protect or to inform. It was previously previously to protect and became primarily to inform, because how can I as a doctor go and actually protect somebody if someone is dangerous? I can't go and guard somebody, but I can inform the police and I can inform the person that they're at risk and things like that. So, I think the standard is generally to do what one can to protect the public interest when the danger to the public outweighs the basically the rights of the individual for privacy. So that's sort of the standard that goes with it. So And that also accounts for the danger to the person. So, the ways that people can be hospitalized against their will, the consistent standard, not all states have this, is danger to self or danger to other people based on a mental illness. And then there's the standard of what we call in California grave disability, meaning inability to manage food, shelter, or clothing due to a mental illness. The grave disability, it doesn't exist in every state. But danger to self, danger to others is in most. And that's very much typically believed to be an imminent risk, meaning you have something that's actionable. You have something that someone plans to do. If someone says to me, I might go hurt somebody at some point, and they don't have any particular people, and they don't have any particular plan, that might not be able to be held in a hospital because, first of all, is that due to a mental illness that they're having thoughts for that? And then the second part is that something that I'm going to be able to treat in the hospital? It's, to give a counterexample for danger to self, if someone's suicidal, but they have suicide, if they're suicidal because they're homeless, for example, which happens all the time in hospitals, and someone says, I'm going to kill myself because I don't have a place to live, I don't have a place to stay, what do you do with that?
Right.
And so it puts a tremendous pressure on psychiatrists to be able to weigh the risk factors and to say, is there things here that we can prevent? Are there modifiable risk factors that we can treat in the hospital? And if there are modifiable risk factors, then we try and intervene. That's a common standard. And some people fall in another extreme where they will hospitalize everybody just to kind of cover their butts because they don't know what's going to happen and they don't want to get sued. And then there's people who go the other side and they discharge everybody and think people, are too... They will shout fire in a crowded theater, or they're crying wolf, I should say. That would be a better analogy. Too much, and that they just they think that the risk is very low because suicide, for example, and violent incidents due to a mental illness is really, really uncommon.
Speak to the issue of stigma as it relates to, especially for men, keeping us from getting the help that we should, or asking for help, or availing ourselves of resources that might be useful.
I guess I would start, James, by saying that the Western society, particularly American culture, with sort of popularizing and celebrating a cowboy and the every man is an island and like the lone rugged individualism, John Wayne, and all that, it develops kind of a celebration of, I don't know, stoicism, I guess, that it's better for a man to sort of stand on his own than to admit that he ever needs help with something. And, it goes everywhere from a man asking for directions, which is like a cliche now, to, something much more severe, because admitting that someone is depressed or someone is struggling with something means not only that he needs help. In terms of stigma, it often means that he's flawed. Or people tell themselves that, something like that if I need help in this means there's something wrong with me. And that's a big sort of ego blow for people to be able to say that, even if it might be true. And the real truth behind all of that is that, if you're trying to do any level of a team activity, which really all of life is, no one really goes through life as an individual, even though we like to pretend that we are, then there's a constant level of interdependency and exchange, and we all need to be relying on people appropriately, using the resources we have.
Paul Pori, he is a psychiatrist, also connected with the UCLA's Geffen School of Medicine. For more of my conversation with Paul Pori, check our podcast. It'll be posted shortly after the show. Today's topic, men and mental health. We're looking at a site called mantherapy.org, mantherapy.org. It is a partnership among a number of different entities that is headed by the State of Colorado Office of Suicide Prevention. The first individual we're going to hear from in my conversation and examination of that site, his name is Joe Conrad. He's the CEO and founder of Cactus. They're an ad agency out of Colorado.
I'm Joe Conrad. I'm the founder and CEO here at Cactus. Cactus is an ad agency based in Denver, Colorado. We've been around since 1990. Our vision from day one is to help brands thrive in harsh environments and take on challenging situations. And the way we do that is by creating meaningful work that makes a huge impact. And so that's the journey that we've been on for the past 2.5 decades, and have had the opportunity to partner with lots of wonderful companies, foundations, government agencies, nonprofit organizations to do just that.
Is there anything different about the way you approach these types of issues, suicide prevention, mental health, mental illness, as compared to how you might approach, I saw a photograph on your site of a really delicious looking sandwich. It was a hamburger or something.
Yeah, that's a great question, James. And I think the simple answer is no, that it's very, very similar. You know, we try to create messaging and through words and pictures that are compelling and relevant and motivating. And whether you're trying to get somebody to come in and buy one of your hamburgers, or to pay attention and to think about their mental health differently, we use the same techniques. And so I really believe that creativity and innovation can move the world forward and accomplish many things. Now, when it comes to an issue as complex as suicide prevention or mental health, there are certainly some unique challenges related to behavior change and health behavior specifically. And so, yeah, there's some unique techniques and best practices that we follow, but at its essence, we try to use the power of branding and creativity to solve for any issue, no matter what industry it's coming from.
Joe Conrad, CEO and founder of Cactus. You can find him online and his company at cactusdenver.com. Again, the creator of the mantherapy.org campaign. If you haven't checked it out, you can hear snippets of it today through my interview with the two folks that are the researchers and helped establish this concept that Joe helped put together in terms of this campaign. And but check out the website. It is funny, it is interesting, and it's actually very, very effective. Next up, my conversation with the two individuals behind the content, the guts of the campaign that Joe Conrad put together. Sally Spencer Thomas, she's a doctor of psychology, a clinical psychologist by training. She is CEO and founder of the Carson J. Spencer Foundation. Jared Hinman is with the Office of Suicide Prevention for the state of Colorado. He's the program director there.
Hello, I'm Sally Spencer Thomas, CEO and co-founder of the Carson J. Spencer Foundation.
Hi, I'm Jared Heinman, the Violence and Suicide Prevention Section Manager at the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
As a psychologist and a suicide prevention specialist, I have a strong professional interest in the work of man therapy. I also have a personal interest. I lost my younger brother to suicide in 2004, and he was 34 years old at the time, an entrepreneur here in Denver who happened to live with a mental health condition, namely bipolar disorder. And, in the last few weeks of his life, as it was becoming very clear to the family that he was incredibly distressed, we were scrambling for resources. And, in the end, I think largely it was the stigma that killed him more than the illness itself. We had access to resources, all of that. He just didn't have a role model that showed him that as a man going through tough times, it's courageous to reach out and, get support in a way that gets your life back on track.
When we talk about suicide deaths, men of a working age really carry the burden. And we had historically done very little to reach this demographic. And so what Sally and I really do from a nonprofit and a public perspective is bring that suicide prevention expertise to the table, which has been invaluable. And, not just Sally and I and our two organizations, but we also brought together a group of national advisors who are nationally and internationally known in the suicide prevention and the behavioral health communities. And so having that expertise and leadership at the table from the get-go has been one of the reasons, in my opinion, why we've had so much success with man therapy.
So,
Can I just add something there? So this process of partnering has been really the foundation of this program. And one of the things that I have learned over the last many years that we've been working together is that, mental health and suicide prevention in particular, we have a branding problem. We've just got a huge barrier as we're trying to message to the masses is that, people see us as dark, mysterious kind of conversation. It's scary, it's daunting. And so what I've learned is when you partner with a group like Cactus, who really understands how messaging can get through all of the distractions and be compelling and be inspirational and be engaging, it's just taken this in a whole nother level. Like, we're now able to, engage groups like BuzzFeed and, different large organizations because they're attracted to the production, the quality of the marketing and the messaging aspect of this work. And when you have that, you are now able to reach so many more people because the messaging is so well crafted. And so that's been a big lesson for us. I mean, most mental health organizations, they've got, one part-time intern cranking out their messaging. And, and the thought is, well, if we just get the content out there, people will, appreciate it. And that's just really not how messaging works in this day and age.
On that note, I want to listen to Rich Mahogany, and then we're going to talk about what we're hearing, why we're hearing it, why it's there, and why he's saying what he's saying.
Did you know that men have feelings too? No, not just the hippies. All of us. Hello, I'm Dr. Rich Mahogany. Welcome to Man Therapy. Go ahead. This is your time. Click one of the buttons above to continue. Are there buttons? They said there were going to be buttons.
I love that part. That's our introduction to Rich Mahogany, and I'm still on the site, so we may hear him chime in, and that's one of the things. And let's just start there. It's sort of an active site. Their clips are almost like movie clips. It's a really great, and anybody who's listening to this needs to go to the website, mantherapy.org. It's phenomenal. I fell in love with it. He sits there, but it doesn't just go static. I mean, it continues this sort of background. He's shifting around in his chair. He comments if the site is up too long and you haven't clicked on anything. He gives you this, prompt like, let's go. Let's do this. Talk to me about just the opening and the greeting.
Go ahead, Jared.
So, Sally, I'll definitely let you describe some of the background research you did with the focus groups and the in-depth interviews. That's one of 3 video introductions that Dr. Mahogany gives, depending on when and where you click on the site. We just wanted to have some variety for return visitors, but those introduction videos really illustrate the crux of the approach that we decided to take. And we decided to take that approach through doing some pretty in-depth research and looking at other public health or advertising campaigns that are specifically targeted to men. We know that the research tells us that men are resistant to asking for help, and that men don't access traditional mental health services anywhere near the rate that women do. Now, obviously, there are men out there who have and have for a long time access traditional mental health services, but we built this site designed for those guys that may be struggling with some type of emotional behavioral health issue. But
let me just pause you right there, because right now, if you click on this site, you hear that intro, and I'm letting it play, and that clicking you hear, that noise in the background, he's filleting a fish. Okay, he pulls up a cooler and he pulls out a fish. He pulls out a fillet knife and he actually fillets it while he's waiting on you to do something.
Super intentional. I think, first of all, it's really supposed to disarm somebody. People come to what they think is a mental health site with a certain set of expectations, and right off the bat, you're dealing with something different. Like, this is just not how that experience usually goes. Is that, first of all, someone's talking to you and they're trying to engage you, and then they're funny. All of the pieces, all of the videos of where he's sitting there and his eyes are blinking and he's filleting a fish or he's cleaning up his office. For me, that message is like, what? I'm still here. I'm the hardest working therapist out there, 24/7, 365 days. I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. So, you might go off and get distracted from some other things, but I'm going to let you know every once in a while. You can come back and I'll give you some more help or some more information. We hear feedback, especially about the filleting the fish, all the time about, that was so cool. I went off to look at my email and I hear this noise in the background and, he's cleaning his office. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point is how do we disarm men or put them at ease so that they're willing to engage in the website, and that's the role of Dr. Mahogany. So every piece of his presence in the website is to give a little bit of information, but also to put men at ease and to make them feel comfortable to stick around and to explore the site. And our analytics tell us that that's exactly what's happening. I mean, we've had over 500,000 visitors now to the site, and our average time of visit continues to be over 5 minutes, which for the industry is just remarkable. And so we've done something right to engage men, to invite them in, and to keep them at the site so they actually spend some time either taking the 18-point head inspection or exploring the resources that are available in a really thorough way, which is fantastic for us.
And we're going to play some more of Rich Mahogany. But let's just set the record straight. Rich Mahogany is not an actual therapist.
That is correct.
Right?
He is an actor. So he is, and he makes it pretty clear through a couple of the videos. He'll say things like, "Take it from me, I'm not even a real therapist." And so that he's merely a guide designed to walk men and people who care about men through the site.
Why does that work, Sally?
Even with all that disclaimer, though, we'll still get emails like, "What are your credentials?
Are you
Who are you?"
Really?
Or can Rich Mahogany show up at this news media?
I'm going
thing
to play
this
some
event that we have?
soothing noises while you ponder
He's talking
your next
again.
move.
Oh, he's listening to chainsaw music.
Yeah, he's gonna. He's holding up an old-style cassette recorder, and there's this chainsaw playing in the background on this cassette recording, supposedly. Chainsaw music, Jared, is that what that's called?
That's what I call it anyway.
That's amazing. Let's go ahead and click through. And I'm going to click on the link to the left. There's arrows on the left or right. Man therapies. Let's listen to this part.
Did you know that unchecked issues like anger, sadness, squiggly smile, squigglies. What the is this? Stress. Oh, that's supposed to be stress. Stress, or even substance abuse, can lead to dangerous mental illness and even suicidal thoughts. It's true. Hello, I'm Dr. Rich Mahogany. Welcome to Man Therapy. You're the captain of this vessel, so click one of the options above to begin your voyage. What are you doing with my chart?
All right, Sally, go ahead.
As I was listening to those pieces from the website, it's clear that a lot of the humor actually comes through from visual pieces of the experience.
Talk to me about what we heard just a moment ago about, he goes off into talking about, stress and, stuff that's bothering you. And then he says squiggly line. He's got this flip chart in front of him. And, it's a complete sight gag, but at the same time, it's disruptive of what you expect, I suppose. Is that the idea behind it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that our research and development told us was that a lot of the men that we're trying to reach, we call them double jeopardy men with a number of risk factors who are also least likely to seek care on their own. They don't necessarily see their problems through a mental health framework. So they're not necessarily seeing themselves as depressed or anxious or whatever. What they often report is that they have a very stressful life. So there's things outside of them that are causing them distress or despair, relationships, family, jobs, etc., and that what they're mostly experiencing is stress. And so what we're trying to do with the website is actually to help them connect the dots and transition some of those experiences to acknowledge that there might be some more significant things going on there than just stress, and that there's certain benchmarks where they can again reach out for different types of resources. So that gag where he's starting to talk about are you experiencing these different things is a first attempt at that, because I think most people can acknowledge they have a certain level of stress in their lives, and sometimes it gets worse. And when it gets worse to a certain point, then other things start falling apart, and that's where they're trying to make that bridge.
Talk to me about that.
I would just add that traditionally, I think men hear the word depression or mental health, and they don't connect that things like stress and anxiety fit within that. And so, say, oh, I think you're depressed. Men are like, oh, I'm not depressed. That's not a manly thing. But if you talk about anger and anxiety and stress, then men can resonate with that a little bit. And so, like Sally said, it's really about connecting the dots.
Talk to me about that term that you use, Sally, and Jared obviously chime in on that as well. Double jeopardy men. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously this website isn't for all men. Whenever you try to create something for all people, you have absolutely reached no one. We were very intentional to reach a certain subpopulation of men that we know is highest risk for suicide death. And that's men with multiple risk factors. So things like substance abuse, a strong sense of masculinity, people who are, very self-reliant and independent, people who, don't want to be the weak link in their team or, have that identity of being ill or broken, that kind of man. Multiple risk factors, and also least likely to seek help on their own. So they're not seeking preventative care really in any area of their life, and certainly not this, because of all of the social conditioning they've gotten about what that would mean for them. So it's a subcategory of men that we find that this is really resonating with, because it helps them think about their mental health in a different way and makes it manly to be courageous and take action before things become catastrophic.
And that whole manly macho thing, is it useful to think about or try to understand where that comes from in the effort to get men to be more proactive about engaging in either maintenance or intervention if they're having issues that are going unchecked?
Well, I'll certainly chime in because it's one of my favorite parts about the background and history of this project is I don't think we can do this work without thinking about how we as a society have defined what manliness means, what masculinity is. And so one of the things we talk about, or that resonates with me when we present this topic, is we say we made the deliberate decision, as we say it, to fish where the fish are. So we want to meet men where they're at. And to do that, we have to engage men who really embrace these traditional definitions of what masculinity means. We need to meet them where they're at to be able to engage with them. And so that's why that's such an important approach from my perspective. I mean, there's a lot of relevance, and it's important work to also change our definitions of what masculinity means, but all we're simply trying to do is say, yes, you embrace what traditional masculinity, how it's defined. We're simply trying to just add a little tweak to that definition to say, in order to be that man, in order to represent yourself under those definitions, you can't do that unless you're whole, unless you have strong wellness all the way around, including mental wellness. And so I think that's, for me, it really resonates at that level.
And I'll just add that, yes, the three partners were absolutely steadfast in that decision. And we've gotten some pushback. And we knew we were going to get pushback because we're taking a bold approach. So we've not wavered. But, not all mental health professionals, not all people who have been in the mental health work for a while, whether they're consumers or providers, get what we're trying to do. And so about 7% on our survey said that they were offended or upset by this for some reason. And when we look at their answers, it's pretty clear to us that either they're in the field or like they've done a significant amount of work in their own life to come through a hard time or to change their ideas about masculinity. And they feel like some of the tone of kind of talking about some of those stereotypes brings us back a little bit. And our response to them is, this isn't for you. You're already down the path and appreciating all of this, all of these issues. This is for the man who is, challenged in some way by a mental health condition or life circumstance and is kind of overwhelmed by that, where they can go in and they can see themselves and they can hear a tone that kind of reminds them of where they are, and like Jared said, then moves them to that next step. So we're okay with people. Again, it's not for everybody.
It's a small
the person
percentage.
Yeah, the person that makes the mental health resource that everybody loves, I would like to shake their hand because it's pretty impossible, I think.
Yeah.
But that actually makes a change, you know. But when you're really focused on a target demographic that you kind of know what they're thinking, what they're needing, what they're looking for, and then you can respond to that and watch them move, that's what we're trying to do. That's where we're at.
And Sally, let me continue with you on that on a related topic of the question that I asked Jared about whether or not it's useful to think about how we got here as a society and how men see themselves. What about how women see men? How does that dynamic affect the women who, you know, were raised in the same society and may hold a lot of those same ideas about what men are supposed to be?
What we do know is that when a man does go engage in any kind of helping services, most often the primary thing that got them there was the encouragement of a primary partner, most often a wife or a girlfriend. So that women play a critical role in the chain of survival for men because in general women aren't as conditioned to always be pull yourself up by your bootstraps and don't show weakness and all that. Less so. It's changing every day, but less so. It's not a big a deal for us to go seek, all kinds of preventative care early, just as a matter of course of our lives. You know, the mammograms and the blood pressure and all of that stuff. We just kind of schedule it in and do it because that's what you need to do to stay healthy, and it's not a big deal. I think for men it can be a little bit more of a difficulty to do the preventative work, and then certainly when there are symptoms emerging that need attention, there's more of an internal conflict of what does this mean to me as a man to not be well.
And Jared, that reminds me of the graphic in one of the PowerPoint presentations that I found on the web that you did, and it shows the set of dials, sort of this front of like an old, I don't know, some piece of electronics, and it's got men and it's got women. The man has one switch on and off, and then the women, there's about 20 dials. Is that what we're talking about? Women, at least certainly perhaps even see themselves, as Sally pointed out, there's a lot more going on and they just attend to it. Guys, we don't see ourselves that way. Or did I miss the point about that graphic?
No, you got the point. That's from one of our national advisors, Dr. Paul Quinnett, who is an evolutionary psychologist, and so he uses that slide from time to time just to illustrate the differences, you know, again, speaking in these broad generic terms of between men and women, that men can often be have a one-track mind, and very few things kind of play into decision-making and how we operate. So it's a humorous way to, illustrate that men and women may be different in how they approach the world. And that you can't just have the same approach to reach both sexes.
Go ahead, Sally.
The other piece that came out in the help-seeking literature that I think is relevant here is that for women, generally speaking, again, not all women, but for many women, when we go seek help, that's it. There's no debt to pay. We receive help. We accept it. We can move on. For many men, because of some power dynamics, sometimes being in debt for getting help needs to be repaid. Men get help from each other all the time. Let me help you move. I'll help you clean out your gutters. I'll help you fix your toilet. Back and forth we go. But the debt of asking for help gets repaid in some way. When we're talking about mental health services, there's a number of reasons why, you cannot clean out your therapist's gutters or help them move. It's just one of those ethical, professional boundaries that can't be violated. And this is one of the reasons why it's the predominance of people who go to mental health counseling are women. I don't know what the numbers are currently, but it's far over 50% of people who show up in mental health services are women or female. And so that's an obstacle. And it's also one of the reasons when you look at the 12-step programs where you see a much greater gender balance is because men can go in there and say, right now I'm needing support and I'm willing to receive your support, but I can see down the way when I'm sober, when I'm in recovery, I can pay that back. I can be somebody else's sponsor or mentor or whatever, and I can help bring the next person along, and I can make meaning out of my struggle by paying it back to the next generation or whatever. So we need to find ways to help men have what we call reciprocity in the help-seeking process, so that they can, receive support or help or take action, but then down the way they can repay that in some way. And there's a number of really cool models that are emerging right now that are really exciting. One of them is actually called Project Helping, and I'm a big fan, where people who have various different types of mental health conditions, whether it be bipolar or depression or anxiety or whatever, they engage in volunteering in their community, and they do it together. So, and again, 50-50 gender balance are showing up for this work. But it's that sense of, community, we're doing this together, and, we're helping others, and that makes us feel good. So in any place that we can find opportunities for men to make meaning out of their challenges, when they've got their feet under them, it helps people stay in the healing process. It helps them make sense out of their struggle, so it wasn't just, this thing that blindsided them in their life. It's actually something that can make them stronger. All of those opportunities, I think, are another place we need to focus on as we're trying to sort out what's going to help men.
All right. I want to move on to some of the testimonials that are on the site. This is Tony.
My mom was a Native American, full-blooded, and she was mean. I took severe beatings from her, and my dad was just like a person who was there who wasn't there. Kids are impressionable, and the only impression I got is I wasn't wanted, even at a young age, is I don't fit in, I don't belong here. Not even in the military, where you're supposed to feel like, teamwork and everything else. And I played on basketball teams, football teams, and I was an athlete in school and everything else. But I never felt that part of wanting to be a part of. And it was lonely life. It was a very lonely life.
Now, Tony goes on to talk about his struggle, his attempt to take his own life. It's a very compelling story. One of the cool things graphically is the way it is shot is also very compelling. Is when Tony starts talking, you've got a close-up, full frame shot of his face. And then you pull back and you realize that he's in a wheelchair. And that visual alone, and in conjunction with him telling his story, I mean, it's heart-wrenching. It's really, really compelling. Your thoughts?
The one thing I remember about Tony, and Sally, correct me if I'm wrong, but Tony kind of found us and we found him at a community presentation about man therapy in Pueblo, Colorado. And Sally and I went down there to do what we call these little town hall meetings, to go introduce people to the site and get people bought in and to engage the community in man therapy. And Tony happened to be at that presentation and, clearly spoke to him, and he connected with Sally and I after that, and was gracious enough to tell his story. And to me, that's the real power of this site. We've got this guy who didn't know anything about man therapy and showed up and was compelled enough and moved enough to tell his story on film, which is it's a really awesome story from my perspective.
Yeah, I just was so thrilled that Tony was agreeable to work with us. His story is completely compelling. If you put yourself in his place, he had significant loss, significant hardship, just facing all kinds of obstacles. And when you get far enough in the video, he talks about how, he showed up at this motel to take his life. And there was something about how he did that, how he showed up in the lobby, that the attendant in the registration desk was like, there's something not right here. And it really was that person in the hotel that kind of started to take action that saved his life. And so not only do I love that story about Tony's resilience and recovery, from places that most people would think would be so hard to overcome. He's got a fully thriving life right now on every front. So not only his story, but also you never know. You could be someone in a grocery store and make a comment. You could be someone in a hotel lobby, let alone a close friend or family member, the things that you can say when you're reaching out when somebody is in that dark place matters tremendously. And so really one of our messages is, everybody plays a role in this work. Everybody can save a life.
He doesn't even know who the person was. And to this day, he doesn't know who this person was, but calls that person his angel, somebody who literally saved his life because they made that call and took the time to just go one step further to try to help this guy, somebody that they perceived to be in distress.
Total stranger.
Let's listen to Zach.
I played all sorts of sports when I was a kid, so I loved to bike, hike, run, play basketball, play football. My biggest hobby, though, honestly, is being a father to my two sons. I've got an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old sons, Alejandro and Santiago. And it all kind of came crashing down, and I had later what I figured out was a panic attack. And I've broken bones on a football field and torn ligaments on a basketball court, but none of that prepared me for that moment.
Now, Zach's story was particularly tough for me to listen to because that's a lot like my story. My own lived experience, my depression came as on the heels of divorce and job loss and all of that cocktail that a lot of guys go through. And he talks about his suicidal ideation, the idea that he thought about it, and that was a low point for him that compelled him to do something about it, and he reaches out.
Yeah, Zach's another great example of a guy whose story is so compelling, and he's made such a great contribution, not only in his life, but with his kids and his community. And what's one of the things I really enjoy about the testimonials, and we focused on them, is tell the story of how guys got to where they were at, but really the message is about, here's what got me through, here's what helped get me out of that dark times and get me to a place where I'm now thriving. And what's great about it is the reasons are different. I mean, it depends on the guy and the story. And so one of the messages is, if guys spend some time or looking at those videos, is that there's a whole variety of things that got people through. It's not just going to see a mental health professional. It can be a whole variety of different things, from faith to a total stranger to friends and family, that there are a variety of different ways that guys can recover. And so that's one of the keys to the testimonials as well.
We're going to have to leave it right there. It was so difficult to try to figure out and edit what to leave in, what to take out. Still didn't get as much as I wanted done, but you can find the extended interviews of all of today's guests, Paul Pori, Joe Conrad, Sally Spencer Thomas, and Jared Hinman, on the Mindset Podcast, available on your favorite app like iTunes or iHeartRadio. Until next week, for Mental Health News and Information, Mindset Mental Health News and Information, I'm your host, James Curtis. Dare to see mental health differently, because when we understand why we do what we do, it helps us all do better. See you next week.